If you think romance is just flowers and promises, brace yourself. This one has wine, secrets, and a family that treats marriage like a contract. He never expected to fall for real, and she never expected to love a man who keeps part of his life locked behind 7 doors. The problem? Keys always end up on the floor. The morning sunlight filtered through the vineyard in golden streams, painting the rolling hills of Napa Valley in shades of amber and green. Adrian Lawson stood at the edge of the property, hands buried deep in the pockets of his tailored pants, his jaw clenched so tightly it ached. 28 years old, heir to one of the largest oil empires in the country, and he felt like a prisoner in his own life. "You will marry her." His father's words from the previous week still echoed in his mind like a death sentence. "The agreement is made. Victoria Sterling will unite our companies. When she turns 21, you will become her husband." Adrian had fought back with everything he had. He had argued, reasoned, even threatened to walk away from the family business entirely. But Richard Lawson was a man carved from stone and ambition, unmoved by his youngest son's protests. "You think this is negotiable?" His father had leaned forward across the massive mahogany desk, his voice dropping to that dangerous quiet that meant the conversation was over. "This merger will secure our future for generations. You will do this, Adrian. If I have to drag you to that altar myself, you will do this." Adrian's older brothers had been there, watching the confrontation unfold. Colin, the eldest at 36 and CEO of Lawson Oil, had placed a hand on Adrian's shoulder afterward, his expression sympathetic but resigned. "He won't budge on this. You know how he is." Bradley, the middle brother at 34, had been more direct. "It's 3 years away, man. Maybe something will change." But nothing would change. Adrian knew his father too well. The girl in question, Victoria Sterling, was barely 18, a sharp-tongued heiress who made no secret of her disdain for the arrangement. At the formal dinner where the agreement had been announced, she had cornered him in the hallway, her eyes blazing with fury. "If they force us into this," she had hissed, "I will make your life absolute hell, every single day, until you break and beg for a divorce." If this story is touching your heart, show your support. Leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with your friends. Every action helps us keep bringing you new stories full of emotion. He had almost laughed at her venom. She had no idea that he was just as trapped, just as furious. But there was something else in her eyes, something furtive and painful. Later he would learn the truth from Bradley's careless comment. Victoria Sterling was hopelessly in love with Colin. She watched Adrian's oldest brother with the desperate longing of unrequited affection, and being promised to the youngest Lawson brother felt like a cruel joke at her expense. Now standing in the California sunshine 7 days after that catastrophic announcement, Adrian needed to think. He needed distance from his father's mansion, from the suffocating expectations, from the future that felt like a noose tightening around his neck. This vineyard had always been his refuge. For years, he had visited the elderly owner, Jonathan Whitmore, who had become something of a mentor. They shared a passion for wine, the art of cultivation, the science of fermentation, the poetry of a perfect vintage. Adrian had spent countless afternoons walking these rows of grapevines, learning everything he could, dreaming of the day he might own something like this himself. And now that day had come. Jonathan was retiring, childless, ready to sell to someone who would love the land as much as he did. Adrian had the money, the knowledge, and the desperate need for something that was entirely his own, something his father couldn't control or manipulate or use as a bargaining chip. He pulled out his phone and made the call. "Jonathan, it's Adrian. I want to buy the vineyard, all of it. Let's finalize everything this week." The old man's delighted laughter crackled through the speaker. "I was hoping you'd say that, son. Come by tomorrow. We'll celebrate properly." Adrian ended the call and turned to survey the property that would soon be his. The main house sat nestled among ancient oak trees, its stone facade warm and inviting. The fermentation building stood to the east, and beyond it row upon row of grapevines stretched toward the horizon. This would be his empire, smaller than Lawson Oil perhaps, but built on his own terms, with his own hands. Movement caught his eye near the southern vineyard. A figure walked among the vines too far away to make out clearly. Probably one of Jonathan's workers, he thought absently. He didn't know then that his entire life was about to change. That the person walking through those vines would become the reason he breathed, the axis around which his world would spin. He didn't know that in just a few hours he would meet Savannah Fleming, and nothing, not his father's commands, not promised marriages, not the weight of family expectations, would ever matter again the way she would matter. Adrian started walking toward the main house, his mind already cataloguing improvements and changes. He had 3 years before his father expected him to honor that absurd agreement. 3 years to build something meaningful here, to prove that he was more than just a pawn in Richard Lawson's chess game. 3 years felt like forever. It would turn out to be nowhere near enough time. Savannah Fleming had always believed that mornings in the vineyard were when the world whispered its secrets. At 21, she had lived on this property her entire life, the daughter of Thomas Fleming, Jonathan Whitmore's most trusted administrator and friend. While other girls her age dreamed of cities and bright lights, Savannah found her poetry in the quiet rustle of grape leaves and the earthy scent of fertile soil. This particular morning, she had slipped off her shoes the moment she stepped outside, letting the cool dirt press against her bare feet. Her father always scolded her for this habit. "You'll cut yourself on something, Savannah." But she couldn't help it. The connection to the earth centered her, reminded her that some things were worth staying rooted for. She wore a simple cream-colored dress that fell to her knees, her dark hair pulled back in a loose braid that was already coming undone. Her mother had died when she was 12, and Savannah had learned to navigate the world with quiet observation, finding comfort in routine and the predictable rhythm of the seasons. Jonathan had mentioned over breakfast that the vineyard would soon have a new owner. "A good man," the elderly vintner had said with satisfaction. "Young Adrian Lawson. You've met him a few times over the years, haven't you?" Savannah had vague memories of a tall, serious man who came to taste wines and walk the property with Jonathan, someone who spoke about fermentation techniques and oak barrel aging with genuine passion. She remembered his hands, strong and careful as he held a wine glass up to the light, and the way his voice deepened when he talked about something he loved. But she had never really looked at him. Not the way women looked at men they were interested in. He had always seemed untouchable, wrapped in expensive suits and an air of quiet authority that made her retreat into her natural shyness. Now, as she walked between the rows of Cabernet Sauvignon vines, gently checking the clusters for ripeness, she wondered what it would mean to have a new owner. Would her father keep his position? Would anything change? "Excuse me." The voice made her spin around, her heart leaping into her throat. A man stood at the end of the row, backlit by the morning sun so she couldn't quite see his face. But she recognized his silhouette, tall and broad-shouldered, with an athletic build that his perfectly tailored shirt couldn't quite conceal. Adrian Lawson. He stepped closer, and Savannah's breath caught. She had been wrong in her memories. He wasn't just tall and serious. He was devastatingly handsome in a way that made her suddenly painfully aware of her bare feet and disheveled braid. His dark hair was slightly too long, falling across his forehead in a way that suggested he ran his hands through it often. His jaw was sharp and defined, his eyes a striking shade of grey-blue that seemed to look right through her. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice carrying that same deep timbre she remembered. "I didn't mean to startle you. I'm Adrian Lawson." "I know," Savannah managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I mean, I've seen you here before. You're buying the vineyard." His expression shifted into something softer, almost a smile. "I am. And you are?" "Savannah Fleming. My father is Thomas Fleming. He manages the property." "Ah." Adrian's eyes did something that made her stomach flutter. They traveled from her face down to her bare feet and back up again, not leering but noticing everything. The administrator's daughter who walks barefoot through the vines. She felt heat rush to her cheeks. "My father told you that. Jonathan did, actually. He said you know these vines better than anyone, that you can tell which clusters will make the best wine just by touch." It was true. Savannah had spent her childhood learning from Jonathan, developing an instinct for the grapes that most winemakers spent decades cultivating, but hearing this stranger acknowledge it made her feel exposed somehow. "I should let you get back to work," Adrian said when she didn't respond, but he made no move to leave. Instead, he stepped closer, his eyes fixed on hers with an intensity that made it hard to breathe. "May I ask you something?" Savannah nodded, not trusting her voice. "Do you like it here? Working with the vines, I mean. Is this something you want to keep doing?" The question surprised her. Most people assumed she helped her father out of obligation, that a young woman would naturally want something more exciting than a quiet life in wine country. But Adrian was looking at her like her answer actually mattered. "I love it," she admitted quietly. "This place is my home, these vines." She reached out and touched a leaf, her fingers gentle. "They're like family." Something shifted in Adrian's expression, a flash of emotion so raw and vulnerable that it made her chest tighten. For just a moment, the polished businessman disappeared, and she saw someone profoundly lonely searching for exactly what she had just described. Home. "Then I'm glad," he said softly, "because I want to keep everything exactly as it is. Your father, the staff, you. If you'll stay." "I'll stay," Savannah whispered. They stood there in the golden morning light, the space between them charged with something neither of them understood yet. Adrian's phone buzzed in his pocket, breaking the spell. He glanced at it, his jaw tightening, and Savannah saw shadows return to his eyes. "I should go," he said. "It was good to meet you properly, Savannah Fleming." "You too, Mr. Lawson." "Adrian," he corrected. "Please, just Adrian." He turned and walked away, his strides long and purposeful. Savannah watched until he disappeared around the corner of the fermentation building, her heart beating in a rhythm that felt new and terrifying and exhilarating all at once. She didn't know that Adrian had stopped just out of sight, leaning against the stone wall with his eyes closed, trying to remember how to breathe. He didn't know why a barefoot girl in a simple dress had made the world tilt on its axis. He only knew that when he'd looked into her sweet brown eyes, the crushing weight of his father's ultimatum had lifted just a little. And for the first time in 8 days, Adrian Lawson allowed himself to hope that maybe, just maybe, 3 years might be enough time after all. Adrian returned to the vineyard 3 days later with a leather portfolio under his arm and a determination that surprised even himself. The purchase papers were signed, the property officially his, but that wasn't why his heart hammered against his ribs as he drove through the main gates. He told himself he was there to discuss operational details with Thomas Fleming, to review the staff schedules, to understand the harvest timeline, all legitimate business reasons that had nothing to do with a barefoot girl with eyes like melted chocolate and a smile that had haunted his dreams for 72 hours straight. The lie lasted exactly as long as it took him to spot her near the tasting room, arranging bottles on wooden shelves. She wore jeans today and a soft lavender sweater that made her skin glow. Her hair fell loose around her shoulders in dark waves, and when she reached up to place a bottle on the top shelf, Adrian's mouth went dry. "Let me help you with that," he said, his voice coming out rougher than intended. Savannah gasped and spun around, the bottle slipping from her fingers. Adrian's reflexes kicked in. He lunged forward and caught it inches before it shattered on the stone floor, his other hand instinctively reaching for her waist to steady them both. For a suspended moment, they stood frozen. His palm burned against the small of her back through the thin sweater. Her hands had landed on his chest, her fingers splayed across his shirt. She smelled like lavender and vanilla, and Adrian felt something inside him crack wide open. "I'm sorry," she breathed, her cheeks flushing that captivating shade of pink. "I didn't hear you come in." "No, I'm sorry." But he didn't let go immediately. Couldn't. His body had stopped taking orders from his brain the second he'd touched her. "I should have announced myself." Savannah stepped back quickly, smoothing her sweater with nervous hands. "Thank you for catching that. It's a 2015 Reserve Cabernet. Jonathan would have killed me if I broke it. Jonathan sold me the vineyard, remember? I would have been the one mourning that bottle." Adrian set it carefully on the counter, buying himself a moment to regain his composure. "Though I'm more concerned about your hands. Are you all right?" "I'm fine," she said softly, but she was looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read, wariness mixed with something that looked dangerously like curiosity. He shouldn't push. He knew he shouldn't. He was promised to another woman, trapped in an arrangement that made any relationship impossible. The smart thing would be to keep his distance, to treat Savannah Fleming like the employee's daughter she was, and nothing more. But when had Adrian Lawson ever done the smart thing when it came to something he wanted? "I brought coffee," he said, pulling 2 cups from the carrier he'd set on a nearby table. "I don't know how you take yours, so I got cream and sugar on the side." Savannah's eyes widened slightly. "You brought me coffee?" "I figured you might need it. Your father mentioned you're usually here before sunrise." "I am, but..." She hesitated, clearly torn between politeness and something else. Suspicion, maybe, or self-preservation. Why? Why did I bring you coffee? Why are you being nice to me? The question was so direct, so disarmingly honest, that Adrian felt his carefully constructed walls tremble. He could have deflected, made up some excuse about wanting to know his employees. Instead, he found himself telling the truth. Because I haven't stopped thinking about you since we met. The words hung in the air between them, too honest, too raw. Savannah's lips parted in surprise, and Adrian watched a dozen emotions flicker across her face. Confusion, fear, something that might have been hope. Mr. Lawson. Adrian, she amended quietly. I don't understand what you want from me. What did he want? Everything. He wanted to know why she walked barefoot through the vines. He wanted to hear her laugh. He wanted to memorize every expression that crossed her face, to learn all the small things that made her who she was. He wanted to touch her again, to feel that electric shock of rightness that had jolted through him when his hand found her waist. He wanted things he had no right to want. I want to know you, he said simply. If you'll let me. Savannah wrapped her arms around herself, a protective gesture that made his chest ache. You don't know anything about me. I'm nobody, just the administrator's daughter. You're not nobody. Adrian took a step closer, watching her pupils dilate as the distance between them shrank. You're the woman who knows these vines like their family, who walks barefoot because you need to feel connected to the earth, who probably has a favorite spot in this entire vineyard where you go when you need to think. Her breath hitched. How did you... Everyone has a sacred place, Savannah, somewhere they feel most themselves. He risked reaching out, his fingers brushing a strand of hair away from her face. She trembled but didn't pull away. I'd like to know yours, if you'll show me. For a long moment she just stared at him, those brown eyes searching his face for something. Whatever she found there must have surprised her, because her expression softened just slightly. The old oak tree, she whispered, at the edge of the northern vineyard. That's where I go. Adrian felt like he'd been given something precious and fragile. Thank you. I should finish organizing these bottles, Savannah said, but she didn't move. Neither did he. The sound of footsteps on gravel broke the spell. Thomas Fleming appeared in the doorway, his weathered face breaking into a smile when he saw Adrian. Mr. Lawson, good to see you again. Savannah, did you offer our new owner some coffee? He brought his own, Savannah said quickly, her cheeks flaming as she grabbed one of the cups Adrian had brought and took a sip to hide her embarrassment. Thomas's eyes narrowed slightly, his gaze moving between them with the sharp awareness of a protective father. I see. Well, Adrian, I have those harvest schedules you wanted to review. If you'll follow me to the office? Of course. Adrian let his eyes linger on Savannah for one more heartbeat. Thank you for the conversation. You're welcome, she murmured, not quite meeting his eyes. As Adrian followed Thomas out, he glanced back once and caught Savannah watching him. She looked away immediately, but not before he saw the same confused longing on her face that was currently tearing him apart from the inside. This was dangerous. This was impossible. This was going to end in heartbreak for both of them. But as Adrian listened to Thomas discuss irrigation systems and frost protection, all he could think about was an old oak tree at the edge of the northern vineyard, and the barefoot girl who found peace there. He would go there tomorrow, and the day after. And every day after that, until Savannah Fleming understood that he wasn't just being nice. He was falling. Savannah knew she should stop thinking about Adrian Lawson. For 2 weeks, she told herself that his visits to the vineyard were purely professional, that his lingering conversations meant nothing, that the intensity in his grey-blue eyes when he looked at her was just her imagination running wild. But then he would appear, always when she least expected it, with coffee or pastries from the bakery in town, asking casual questions that somehow led to hour-long discussions about everything and nothing. He wanted to know her favorite season, autumn when the grapes turned from green to deep purple. Her favorite wine, a 2012 Pinot Noir that Jonathan had made the year her mother died. Whether she'd ever wanted to leave Napa Valley. Never, not even once. And every conversation left her more confused, more drawn to him, more terrified of the feelings building in her chest like a summer storm. You're playing with fire, sweetheart. Savannah looked up from the notebook where she'd been recording bricks levels to find her father watching her with concern etched into his kind face. They stood in the middle of the vineyard, surrounded by rows of Chardonnay vines, heavy with nearly ripe fruit. "I don't know what you mean," she said, but the lie felt heavy on her tongue. Thomas Fleming had raised his daughter alone for 9 years. He knew every tell, every deflection. "Adrian Lawson. He's here almost every day now, and it's not because he's that concerned about crush dates." Heat flooded Savannah's cheeks. "He's just being friendly. He's new here and he looks at you like you're the sun, and he's been living in darkness his entire life." Her father's voice was gentle but firm. "And you look at him the same way, even when you think nobody's watching." Savannah's hands trembled as she closed her notebook. "It doesn't matter how I look at him. He's not for someone like me, Dad. He comes from a completely different world. Did you see his car? I looked it up. It costs more than most people make in 5 years. He wears watches that could pay off a house. He's sophisticated and educated and he's falling in love with you." The words hit her like a physical blow. "He's not. Savannah." Her father took her hands in his work-roughened ones. "I've watched powerful men my entire career. I know the difference between someone who's interested and someone who's consumed. Adrian Lawson is consumed by you. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Before Savannah could answer, movement near the oak tree caught her attention. Her sacred place, the spot she'd foolishly revealed to Adrian 2 weeks ago. And there he was, as if summoned by their conversation, sitting on the stone bench beneath the ancient branches, waiting. "Go talk to him," her father urged quietly. "At least find out what he wants, what you both want." Savannah's heart thundered as she walked across the vineyard toward the oak tree. Adrian saw her coming and stood, his tall frame tense with an emotion she was learning to recognize, hope warring with fear, the same battle raging inside her own chest. "I'm sorry," he said before she could speak. "I know this is your spot. I shouldn't have come here without asking, but I needed to think, and this is the only place that—" He trailed off, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "The only place that what?" Savannah asked softly. "That feels like you, like peace." He looked at her with such raw vulnerability that she felt something inside her shift and settle. "Can I tell you something? Something I haven't told anyone." She nodded, moving closer until only a few feet separated them. 3 weeks before I met you, my father made a deal with one of his business rivals, a marriage arrangement between me and the man's daughter. She's barely 18 now. We're supposed to marry when she turns 21. The ground seemed to tilt beneath Savannah's feet. "You're engaged?" "No." The word came out fierce and immediate. "I'm promised, which is not the same thing. I never agreed to it, never wanted it. She doesn't want it either. She's in love with my oldest brother. But my father doesn't care about what any of us want. He sees it as a business transaction, a way to merge 2 empires. Savannah wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the warm afternoon. "Why are you telling me this?" Adrian closed the distance between them in 2 long strides, his hands coming up to frame her face with a gentleness that made her eyes burn. "Because I need you to know that whatever my father arranged, it has nothing to do with what I feel, with what I want. And what I want, Savannah, what I want so badly it's destroying me, is you. Adrian, I know I have no right to ask you for anything. I know the situation is impossible and unfair and completely insane, but I can't stay away from you. Believe me, I've tried. I told myself to be professional, to keep my distance, to stop finding excuses to come here every single day just to see your smile or hear your laugh or watch the way you touch the vines like they're something precious." His thumb stroked her cheekbones and Savannah felt tears slip free. "This will only hurt both of us." "I know," he whispered, "but I'm already hurting. I've been hurting from the moment I met you and realized what I could never have. So I'm asking, begging for you to give me a chance. Let me prove that what I feel is real. Let me show you that you're not just someone like me, Savannah. You're everything. You're the only thing that matters." She wanted to be strong, wanted to protect her heart from the inevitable devastation. But when she looked into his eyes and saw her own desperate longing reflected back, she couldn't find the words to push him away. "I don't know how this ends," she said, her voice breaking. "Neither do I. But I know how it begins, with you saying yes, to coffee, to walks through the vineyard, to letting me know you the way I'm desperate to." He pressed his forehead to hers, his breath warm against her lips. "Please, Savannah, say yes." She should have said no. Should have walked away from this beautiful, tortured man who made her feel things she'd never felt before. Should have protected herself from the heartbreak she could already see coming like a freight train in the distance. But Savannah Fleming had spent her entire life being careful, being safe, being invisible. And for once, just this once, she wanted to be reckless. "Yes," she whispered. The smile that broke across Adrian's face was sunlight after storm, devastating in its beauty and relief. He didn't kiss her. Not yet. Some instinct telling him she wasn't ready. Instead, he pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was the most precious thing in the world, his face buried in her hair. "Thank you," he murmured against her temple. "Thank you for taking a chance on me." Savannah let herself sink into his embrace, breathing in the scent of expensive cologne and something uniquely him. She felt his heart racing against her cheek, matching the frantic rhythm of her own. 3 years, he'd said. 3 years until his father expected him to honor that arrangement. It should have felt like plenty of time. Instead, it felt like they were standing on the edge of a cliff, and the ground was already crumbling beneath their feet. But for now, wrapped in Adrian's arms beneath her oak tree, Savannah let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, love could be enough to defy even impossible odds. Adrian Lawson had closed billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat. He'd negotiated with ruthless competitors, navigated hostile board meetings, and stood firm against his father's iron will more times than he could count. But trying to plan a proper first date with Savannah Fleming had him pacing his office like a nervous teenager. "You look ridiculous," Bradley said from the doorway, a smirk playing at his lips. "I haven't seen you this worked up since you had to give that presentation to Dad's entire board when you were 22. Adrian glared at his middle brother. "I'm not worked up. You've checked your watch 6 times in the last 3 minutes. You're wearing a hole in that very expensive carpet, and—" Bradley stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. "Are you wearing cologne? You never wear cologne." "I always wear cologne. Not that much." Bradley crossed his arms, studying his youngest brother with growing interest. "What's going on with you? You've been different lately. Distracted. You barely show up to the office anymore, and when you do, you're smiling at your phone like an idiot." Adrian's jaw tightened. He wanted to tell his brothers, wanted to share what was happening in his life, wanted their advice and support. But the secret felt too precious, too fragile, and part of him feared that speaking it aloud would somehow summon their father's attention and destroy everything before it truly began. "I'm just focused on the vineyard," Adrian said carefully. "It's a big investment." "Right, the vineyard." Bradley didn't look convinced, but he let it drop. "Just be careful, okay? Whatever you're doing, whoever you're—" He paused meaningfully. "Dad's been asking about you, about why you're never around. He mentioned that dinner with the Sterlings is coming up soon." Adrian's stomach dropped. Victoria's 21st birthday was still 2.5 years away, but her family enjoyed these periodic dinners to strengthen the bond between the families. Each one made him feel like the walls were closing in. "I'll be there," he said flatly. "You don't have to sound so thrilled about it." Bradley clapped him on the shoulder. "Look, I know this arrangement sucks, but maybe Victoria will meet someone else, or Dad will have a change of heart, or maybe I'll just refuse to go through with it when the time comes." Bradley's expression turned serious. "You know it's not that simple. Dad won't let you walk away from Lawson Oil without a fight. He'll cut you off, tie up your assets, make your life hell. Then let him." Adrian's voice carried a conviction that surprised them both. "Some things are worth fighting for, Brad, even if it costs everything." His brother studied him for a long moment. "You really have met someone, haven't you?" Adrian didn't answer, but his silence was confirmation enough. "Just promise me you'll be smart about this," Bradley said quietly. "Don't let Dad find out until you're ready for that war." After Bradley left, Adrian finished getting ready and drove to the vineyard with his heart in his throat. He'd asked Savannah to let him take her to dinner, a real date away from the property where they were surrounded by staff and her father's watchful eyes. She'd hesitated for so long he thought she'd refuse, but finally she'd agreed. Now, pulling up to the main house where Savannah lived with her father, Adrian felt nerves flutter in his chest like trapped birds. The door opened before he could knock, and his breath simply stopped. She wore a simple emerald green dress that brought out the warm tones in her skin and made her eyes look impossibly large. Her hair was down, falling in soft waves past her shoulders, and she'd applied just enough makeup to highlight her natural beauty without hiding it. She looked terrified and beautiful and so achingly young that Adrian suddenly felt like a predator. "You look stunning," he said, his voice rough. "Thank you." She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear nervously. "You look really good too." He did. He'd agonized over what to wear, finally settling on dark slacks and a grey button-down that brought out his eyes, leaving his typical corporate armor of suits behind. Casual, but put together. Accessible, but still himself. Thomas appeared behind his daughter, his expression pleasant, but his eyes carrying a clear warning. "Hurt her, and there will be consequences." "I'll have her home by 10, Adrian promised. 11 is fine, Thomas said, then added with a small smile, "She's not 16, Mr. Lawson, just take care of my girl." "With my life," Adrian said, and meant it with an intensity that probably should have scared him. The restaurant was an hour away in San Francisco, far enough that they wouldn't run into anyone from Napa Valley, private enough that Adrian had reserved the entire back patio overlooking the bay. As they drove, he kept stealing glances at Savannah, who seemed fascinated by the city lights blooming as dusk fell. "Have you been to San Francisco often?" he asked. "A few times when I was younger. Mom used to bring me to the museums." Her voice softened. "I haven't really gone since she died." Adrian reached across the console and took her hand, threading their fingers together. Her palm was small and warm in his, and when she didn't pull away, something in his chest eased. At dinner they talked about everything. He learned that she'd wanted to be a marine biologist when she was 12, until she realized it would mean leaving the vineyard. She confessed that she'd tried to learn guitar once, but was hopelessly tone-deaf. He told her about growing up in his brother's shadows, always the youngest, always trying to prove himself. About his mother, who died when he was 19 and left a hole in their family that nothing could fill. "Do you miss her?" Savannah asked softly. "Every day she would have liked you." Adrian smiled, but it was edged with sadness. "She would have told me I was an idiot for waiting even 2 weeks to ask you to dinner. I probably would have said no if you'd asked sooner." "Why did you say yes now?" Savannah looked down at their joined hands. They hadn't let go since the car. "Because I'm tired of being afraid. And because when you look at me, I feel like maybe I could be brave." Adrian lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a soft kiss to her knuckles, his eyes never leaving hers. "You're the bravest person I know." Later, as they walked along the Embarcadero with the bay stretching dark and glittering beside them, Savannah stumbled on an uneven stone. Adrian caught her instantly, his arm wrapping around her waist, pulling her against his chest. They stood frozen, her hands pressed against his shoulders, his face inches from hers. "I've got you," he murmured. "I know," she whispered back. He wanted to kiss her. God, how he wanted to kiss her. Wanted to taste those lips that smiled so sweetly, to feel her soften against him, to show her with his mouth what words couldn't express. But something held him back. The knowledge that once he kissed Savannah Fleming, there would be no going back. He would be completely, irrevocably hers. So instead, he pressed his lips to her forehead, lingering there as he breathed her in. "Thank you for tonight. Thank you for asking me." As he drove her home with her hand in his and her head resting against the seat, watching him with sleepy, trusting eyes, Adrian made himself a promise. He would fight for this, for her, no matter what his father threatened, no matter what it cost him, because Savannah was worth burning the entire world down for. 3 weeks into their relationship, Savannah discovered that Adrian Lawson was a terrible cook. "This is supposed to be pasta," she said, trying desperately not to laugh as she poked at the smoking, congealed mess in the pan. They stood in the kitchen of the cottage Adrian had claimed as his when he stayed at the vineyard, a cozy 2-bedroom with exposed beams and a fireplace that made Savannah's heart ache with how perfect it was. "It is pasta," Adrian protested, looking genuinely offended. "I followed the recipe exactly." "Did the recipe say to use an entire container of salt?" "That wasn't salt, that was—" He grabbed the container and his face fell. "Oh, that was salt." Savannah couldn't hold back anymore. Laughter bubbled up from her chest, bright and unrestrained, and after a moment of wounded pride, Adrian joined her. They stood in his kitchen, laughing until tears streamed down their faces, and Savannah thought she'd never been happier in her entire life. "I wanted to impress you," Adrian admitted, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind as she examined the contents of his refrigerator. "I saw this cooking show where the chef made carbonara look easy, and I thought, you thought you could impress a girl who grew up cooking for herself and her father with pasta." She twisted in his arms to face him, her hands settling on his chest. "Adrian, you don't need to impress me with cooking." "Then what do I need to impress you with?" His voice was teasing, but his eyes held that intensity that made her stomach flutter. "You already have." She reached up and touched his jaw, feeling the slight stubble there. "Every single day you impress me just by being yourself." He kissed her forehead, a gesture that had become his signature. Intimate but restrained, showing affection while respecting the boundaries she hadn't explicitly set, but he somehow sensed she needed. "Come on. I'm taking you to that Italian place in town, and we're going to pretend this disaster never happened. Oh, we're definitely telling this story to our grandchildren." The words were out before Savannah could stop them. Her eyes widened in horror as the implication hit. Our grandchildren, as if they had a future, as if there weren't massive obstacles standing between them and forever. But Adrian just smiled, slow and devastating. "Our grandchildren are going to hear a lot of embarrassing stories about me, aren't they? If we have, I didn't mean—" She was flustered now, her cheeks burning. "Hey," he cupped her face gently. "I like the sound of it. Our grandchildren, our future, our everything." The tenderness in his voice broke something open inside her. "Your father will not decide my life. I'm building something here, Savannah, something that's mine. And when the time comes, I'll fight for us. I promise you that." She wanted to believe him. And standing in his arms, looking into eyes that held nothing but sincerity and fierce determination, she almost did. Dinner at the Italian restaurant was loud and chaotic. They'd accidentally chosen a night when the owner's entire extended family was celebrating a birthday. But somehow the chaos made it better. They shared wine and stories, and Adrian told her about the time Bradley had convinced him to sneak into their father's study and ended up knocking over a priceless vase. "What did your father do?" Savannah asked, fascinated by these glimpses into his childhood. "He made us work it off, spent the entire summer filing documents and making coffee runs." Adrian grinned at the memory. "Bradley complained the entire time, but I actually didn't mind. It was the first time Dad treated me like I could be useful, instead of just the youngest son who needed protecting. You wanted to prove yourself to him. I did. I still do sometimes, which is pathetic considering I'm 31 years old." He sighed, taking a sip of wine. Colin never had to prove anything. He was always the golden child, the heir. And Brad carved out his own space by being the diplomat, the one who could smooth over Dad's rough edges. But me, I was just there. Savannah reached across the table and took his hand. "You're not just there to me, you're everything." The look he gave her was so full of emotion that she felt it in her bones. Love, gratitude, awe, and something darker, more desperate, like he was drowning and she was air. "Dance with me," he said suddenly. "What?" "Dance with me, right here." He stood, pulling her up with him. The restaurant speakers were playing something slow and romantic, and other couples had started swaying near their tables. Adrian pulled her close, one hand at the small of her back, the other cradling hers against his chest. Savannah had never been a good dancer. She was too self-conscious, too worried about stepping on toes. But with Adrian, it didn't matter. He led her carefully, spinning her gently, and when she laughed and stumbled, he just held her tighter. "I'm terrible at this," she murmured against his shoulder. "You're perfect." His lips brushed her temple. "Absolutely perfect." They swayed together as the song changed, and then another, neither wanting to let go. Savannah felt his heartbeat strong and steady beneath her palm, felt the rise and fall of his breathing, felt the way his fingers traced small circles on her back. This was intimacy without physicality, the kind of connection that went deeper than desire, that spoke of trust and tenderness and a love that was growing roots. Later, walking back to his car through the quiet streets of Napa, Adrian stopped suddenly and pulled her toward a shop window. "Look." It was an antique jewelry store, closed for the evening, but the window display was still lit. A delicate silver bracelet caught the light, small grapevine leaves etched into the metal. "It's beautiful," Savannah breathed. "Wait here." Before she could protest, Adrian was jogging down the street. He returned 10 minutes later, looking triumphant and slightly sheepish. "The owner lives above the shop. I convinced him to open up." "Adrian, you didn't—" He held out the bracelet. "Let me?" With trembling fingers, she extended her wrist. He fastened the clasp carefully, his touch gentle and reverent. The silver was cool against her skin, the grape leaves catching moonlight. "So you never forget where we started," he said softly. "In a vineyard with you walking barefoot through the vines and me falling hopelessly in love with you." "I'm not going to forget," she whispered, her eyes burning. "Not ever." He kissed her forehead again, lingering there. "Good. Because I need you to remember, Savannah, when things get hard, and they will get hard, I need you to remember this. Remember us. Remember that what we have is worth fighting for." The warning in his words made her chest tight with anxiety. But she pushed it away, choosing instead to focus on the warmth of his arms, the steady beat of his heart, the silver bracelet that felt like a promise on her wrist. They had time, 2.5 years before his father's deadline. Surely that was enough to figure out how to hold on to this beautiful, terrifying thing growing between them. As Adrian drove her home with their fingers intertwined and soft music playing, Savannah touched the bracelet and made her own silent promise. Whatever challenges came, whatever obstacles they faced, she would fight for him too. Because Adrian Lawson, with his terrible cooking skills and his fierce protectiveness and his way of looking at her like she was his entire world, was worth fighting for. 2 months into their relationship, Adrian's phone rang at 3 in the morning. He fumbled for it groggily, his heart sinking when he saw Colin's name on the screen. "What's wrong?" he answered, already pulling on clothes with one hand. "Nothing's wrong." "Well, not exactly wrong. Dad wants a family meeting tomorrow morning. 10 sharp. Non-negotiable." Colin's voice carried that particular edge that meant their father was in one of his moods. "He's been asking questions about where you've been spending all your time." Adrian's blood went cold. "What kind of questions?" "The kind that suggest he's having you followed. Brad and I tried to deflect, but you know how he is. He wants answers, Adrian, and if you don't give them to him, he'll find them himself." After they hung up, Adrian sat on the edge of his bed, his mind racing. He'd been so careful, or so he thought, avoiding social events where he might run into family friends, making sure his visits to the vineyard weren't tracked on the company calendar, keeping Savannah completely separate from his other life. But Richard Lawson hadn't built an empire by missing details. He couldn't go to that meeting, couldn't risk his father discovering Savannah before Adrian was ready to protect her, before he had a plan. The thought of leaving her, even for a day, made his chest tighten with anxiety. They'd fallen into a rhythm, mornings walking the vineyard together, afternoons where she taught him about winemaking while he taught her about business strategy, evenings spent cooking dinner. She'd taken over that responsibility after the pasta incident, and talking until the stars came out. He'd never been this content, this fundamentally happy. At dawn, he drove to the main house and found Savannah already awake, sitting on the porch with coffee and her journal. She looked up as he approached, her smile fading when she saw his expression. "What happened?" He sat beside her and pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her hair. "I have to go back to the city, family meeting. My father is asking questions about where I've been." He felt her tense. "Does he know about me?" "Not yet, but Colin thinks he might be having me followed." Adrian pulled back to look at her, his hands framing her face. "I'm going to fix this, Savannah. I promise. I just need more time to figure out how. Maybe you should just tell them." Her voice was small, uncertain. "Your brothers, at least. You said they're supportive, that they'd understand." "They would, but the second I tell them, it becomes real. My father will find out and he'll come here and he'll try to tear us apart before we're strong enough to withstand it." His thumbs stroked her cheekbones. "I'm not risking you. Not until I'm absolutely certain I can protect you from him." Savannah leaned into his touch, her eyes searching his. "I'm scared." "Me too," he admitted. "But I'm more scared of losing you than I am of my father. And that's saying something." He stayed for breakfast with her and Thomas, trying to memorize the way morning light caught in her hair, the sound of her laugh when her father told an embarrassing story about Adrian trying to prune vines, and accidentally cutting the wrong branches. Every moment felt precious, weighted with the knowledge that his two worlds were about to collide. When he finally had to leave, Savannah walked him to his car. "How long will you be gone?" "A day. 2 at most." He caught her hand, bringing it to his lips to kiss the bracelet he'd given her. "Call me if you need anything, doesn't matter what time." "Adrian." She stepped closer, her free hand resting over his heart. "Be careful, please." He wanted to tell her he loved her. The words burned on his tongue, desperate to be spoken, but something held them back. The fear that once he said them, once he made that declaration, the universe would find a way to punish them both for their happiness. Instead, he kissed her forehead, letting his lips linger there as he memorized the feel of her in his arms. "I'll come back to you. I always will." The drive back to San Francisco felt like traveling to a different planet. The city was all glass and steel, harsh angles and concrete, everything Savannah wasn't. By the time he reached his penthouse apartment, a place he hadn't slept in for over a month, Adrian felt like he was suffocating. The family meeting the next morning was exactly as brutal as he'd anticipated. His father sat at the head of the conference table in Lawson Oil's top-floor boardroom, his expression carved from stone. Colin and Bradley flanked him, both looking uncomfortable. "Glad you could join us," Richard said coldly, "since it's apparently impossible to reach you most days." "I've been working on the vineyard, Dad. You knew that when I bought it." "Working?" "Yes." His father slid a folder across the table. "Is that what we're calling it?" Adrian's stomach dropped as he opened the folder. Inside were surveillance photos. Him and Savannah at the Italian restaurant, walking hand in hand through downtown Napa, sitting together under the oak tree. His private investigator had been thorough. "Who is she?" Richard demanded. Adrian's hands shook with rage as he closed the folder. "That's none of your business. You're promised to Victoria Sterling. Everything you do is my business. I never agreed to that arrangement. You can't force me to marry someone I don't love." "Can't I?" His father leaned forward, his voice dropping to that dangerous quiet. "You're using Lawson money to finance that vineyard. You're trading on the Lawson name to build your little wine empire. One phone call from me and your suppliers dry up. Your distributors disappear. Your investors pull out. I can destroy what you're building before you even finish your first harvest." Colin stood abruptly. "Dad, that's enough. He's your son, not your employee." "He's both, and he'll honor his commitments or face the consequences." Adrian rose slowly, his jaw clenched so tight he thought his teeth might crack. "The only commitment I care about is to her, and you can threaten me all you want, but I'm not walking away from Savannah." "Savannah." His father said her name like it was poison. "The administrator's daughter. You're throwing away a strategic alliance for some vineyard girl." "Don't." Adrian's voice was deadly quiet. "Don't you dare reduce her to that. She's worth 1,000 Victoria Sterlings, 1,000 business deals. She's the only real thing in my entire life." Richard's face flushed with fury. "You have until Victoria's 21st birthday to end this infatuation. After that, you will marry the Sterling girl, or I will cut you off from everything. Your trust fund, your stake in the company, your name. You'll have nothing. Then I'll have nothing." Adrian's voice didn't waver. "But I'll have her, and that's worth more than anything you could ever give me." He walked out before his father could respond, ignoring Colin calling after him. In the elevator, his phone buzzed. A text from Savannah. "Miss you. The vines miss you too. Come home soon. Home." She called the vineyard home. Called him home. Adrian pressed the phone to his chest and made a decision. He couldn't keep living in this limbo, keeping Savannah hidden while his father plotted to control his life. If he wanted a future with her, and God, he wanted that more than his next breath, he needed to act. He called his lawyer from the car. "I need you to set up a separate account. One my father can't touch. Transfer everything I legally own into it, my shares of the vineyard, my personal investments, everything that's mine and not the family's. And I need you to do it quietly. Today." By the time he pulled back into the vineyard gates that evening, Adrian had liquidated assets, transferred funds, and essentially prepared to cut himself free from his father's financial control. It would hurt. He'd lose access to the Lawson Trust, to his stake in the oil company, but he'd survive. More importantly, Savannah would survive. She was waiting on the porch again, and the relief on her face when she saw him made every sacrifice worth it. "You came back," she said unnecessarily, launching herself into his arms. Always. He held her tight, breathing in the scent of her shampoo, feeling his racing heart finally slow. I'll always come back to you, Savannah, no matter what. 4 months into their relationship, Savannah learned that Adrian Lawson had nightmares. She discovered this by accident one evening when she'd fallen asleep on his couch while he worked on wine distribution contracts. A sound woke her, a low, distressed groan coming from his bedroom down the hall. Without thinking, she padded barefoot to his door and knocked softly. Adrian. Another sound, this one closer to a word. Her name, maybe, or a plea. She opened the door carefully. He was tangled in sheets, his face contorted with anguish, his body rigid with tension. No, he mumbled, the word broken and desperate. Can't, won't let you. Adrian. Savannah approached the bed and touched his shoulder gently. Wake up. You're dreaming. He jerked awake with a gasp, his hand shooting out to catch her wrist. For a moment, he didn't seem to recognize her. His eyes were wild, unfocused. Then reality crashed back, and his grip loosened, though he didn't let go. Savannah. His voice was hoarse, raw. God, I'm sorry. Did I scare you? No, well, a little. She sat on the edge of his bed, her thumb stroking the inside of his wrist where she could feel his pulse racing. What were you dreaming about? He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, my father. He was taking you away from me and I couldn't stop him. I couldn't. His jaw clenched. I couldn't protect you. Hey. Savannah cupped his face with her free hand, forcing him to look at her. I'm right here. I'm safe. We're okay. For now. The words came out barely above a whisper. But what happens when... No. She said it firmly, surprising them both. We're not doing that. We're not borrowing trouble from the future. We have right now, this moment, and that's what matters. Adrian pulled her down into his arms, holding her with a desperate strength that spoke of fears too deep for words. She settled against his chest, feeling his heartbeat gradually slow, his breathing even out. They lay like that in the darkness, neither speaking, both clinging to the fragile peace of simply being together. Stay, he murmured against her hair. Please, just sleep here. I just need you close. Okay, she whispered back. She dozed fitfully, waking several times to find Adrian watching her with an expression that made her chest ache. When dawn broke through his curtains, painting them both in shades of gold and rose, he finally spoke. I have something for you. Well, not for you exactly. For us. He sat up, suddenly looking nervous in a way she'd never seen before. Come on. He led her outside, both still in sleep-rumpled clothes, and toward a section of the property she rarely visited, a small plot of land on a hillside overlooking the entire vineyard. Fresh lumber was stacked nearby, and someone had already cleared and leveled the ground. What is this? Savannah asked, though her heart was already beginning to understand. This is where I'm going to build us a house. Adrian's voice trembled slightly. I hired an architect last month. Nothing ostentatious, just something comfortable and beautiful, with windows overlooking the vines. A real kitchen so you can teach me to cook properly. A library for all the books you love. A bedroom that faces east so you can watch the sunrise. Savannah felt tears burn behind her eyes. Adrian, I know we've only been together 4 months. I know this is fast, probably insane. But I'm building a life here, Savannah. Our life. And when the day comes that I can make you mine completely, legally, publicly, forever, I want to have a home waiting for us. She turned to him, this beautiful, complicated man who'd somehow become her entire world. You're sure about all of this, about me? I've never been more sure of anything. He took both her hands in his. You asked me once what you needed to impress me with. The truth is you don't need to try. You impress me just by existing. By the way you touch the vines like they're precious, by the way you see beauty in ordinary moments. By the way you make me feel like maybe I could be enough just as I am, not as my father's son or the Lawson heir or any of the roles I've played my whole life. You are enough, Savannah said fiercely. You've always been enough. He kissed her forehead, lingering there in that gesture that had become their signature. I want to marry you, Savannah. I know I can't ask you properly yet. I need to end things with my father first, need to make sure you're protected from the fallout. But I need you to know that this is where I'm headed. Toward you, toward us, toward forever. Savannah's heart felt too big for her chest. I want that too. All of it. They stood there on the hillside as the sun rose over the vineyard, two people on the precipice of something beautiful and terrifying, holding each other like anchors against the storms they both knew were coming. Later that week, Bradley showed up at the vineyard unannounced. Adrian had been in a business call when Thomas came to find him, his expression troubled. "Your brother is here. He says it's urgent." Adrian found Bradley pacing in the tasting room, looking more agitated than he'd ever seen him. "What's wrong? Is it Dad? Colin?" "Colin knows." Bradley's words came out in a rush. "About her. About Savannah. He saw the surveillance photos on Dad's desk and put two and two together. He's furious that you didn't tell us, hurt that you shut us out. But Adrian..." He grabbed his younger brother's shoulders. "He's on your side. We both are. We always have been." The relief that flooded through Adrian was almost painful. "He's not angry." "Oh, he's angry. Mostly that you didn't trust us enough to confide in us. But he gets it. He understands why you were scared." Bradley's expression softened. "We want to meet her, properly, not through surveillance photos or Dad's paranoid rants. We want to know the woman who made our baby brother grow a spine and stand up to Richard Lawson. She's not... we're not..." Adrian struggled to find words. "Not what? Not in love? Adrian, I've seen you negotiate deals worth billions without breaking a sweat. Last week, Colin said he caught you smiling at your phone like an idiot. You're gone for her. Completely, totally gone. And honestly, it's about damn time." Movement in the doorway made them both turn. Savannah stood there, her eyes wide with uncertainty. "I'm sorry, your father said you were here and I didn't mean to interrupt." "Savannah." Adrian crossed to her immediately, taking her hand. "This is my brother Bradley. Brad, this is Savannah Fleming." Bradley's face broke into a genuine smile. "So you're the one who's been keeping my brother sane. It's really good to meet you." The relief on Savannah's face was palpable. "You too. Adrian's told me about you. About both of you." "Has he?" Bradley shot Adrian a meaningful look. "All good things, I hope." "Mostly," Savannah said with a small smile, "though the story about the vase was particularly memorable." Bradley laughed, and just like that, the tension eased. They spent the next hour sitting in the tasting room, sharing stories and wine. Adrian watched Savannah charm his brother with her quiet intelligence and self-deprecating humor, watched Bradley treat her with genuine respect and interest rather than condescension. As Bradley prepared to leave, he pulled Adrian aside. "She's special, little brother. Hold on to her." "I plan to," Adrian said quietly. "And Adrian? Dad's not going to let this go. You know that, right? He's already talking about moving up the Sterling arrangement, putting more pressure on you. Let him try." Adrian's voice carried a conviction that surprised them both. "I'm done letting him control my life." After Bradley left, Savannah found Adrian standing on the hillside where their future house would be built. She slipped her hand into his, and he pulled her close. "Your brother is nice," she said softly. "He is. Colin will be too, when you meet him." Adrian pressed a kiss to her temple. "I'm sorry I waited so long to introduce you. I was trying to protect you, but I was also being a coward." "You're not a coward. You're just someone who's been hurt by the people who should have protected you." She turned in his arms to face him. "But you have me now, and I'm not going anywhere." As the sun set over the vineyard, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, Adrian held Savannah close and felt something settle in his chest. His brothers knew. His father could rage all he wanted. Adrian had made his choice, and come hell or high water, he was going to marry this woman. 6 months into their relationship, Adrian woke up and knew with absolute certainty that he couldn't wait another day. He'd been planning this moment for weeks, agonizing over every detail. The ring had been custom-made, a simple but elegant design featuring a small diamond surrounded by delicate grape leaves in white gold. He'd hidden it in his desk drawer, taking it out occasionally just to imagine it on her finger. His brothers thought he was insane. Colin had visited the vineyard the previous week and pulled Adrian aside after meeting Savannah properly for the first time. "She's wonderful," Colin had said, his expression serious. "But 6 months, Adrian? You're really going to propose after 6 months?" "I'd propose tomorrow if I thought she'd say yes." Colin had studied him for a long moment before a slow smile crossed his face. "You know what? Go for it. Life's too short to waste time when you've found the right person. Mom would have said the same thing. The mention of their mother had hit Adrian square in the chest. She would have loved Savannah, would have seen in her all the qualities that Adrian treasured: kindness, intelligence, quiet strength, the ability to see through his defenses to the man underneath. Now, standing in the vineyard at dawn with the ring box burning a hole in his pocket, Adrian felt nerves flutter in his stomach for the first time in years. He'd faced down hostile boardrooms, negotiated impossible deals, stood up to his father's fury. But the thought of asking Savannah Fleming to spend her life with him was the most terrifying thing he'd ever done. Because what if she said no? What if 6 months wasn't enough time for her to be sure? What if she saw the complications of his family and decided she couldn't handle it? He found her exactly where he expected, at the old oak tree, sitting on the stone bench with her journal and coffee, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. She looked up as he approached, and the smile that lit her face made his heart stutter. "You're up early," she said, patting the space beside her. "Couldn't sleep." He sat down, taking her hand automatically. The gesture had become second nature, reaching for her, touching her, making sure she was real and there and his. Bad dreams again? No. Good ones, actually. He brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles. Dreams about our future, about the house we're going to build here, about waking up next to you every morning for the rest of my life. Savannah's breath caught. "Adrian, I know it's only been 6 months. I know most people would say this is too fast, too reckless. But Savannah, I knew I wanted to marry you the first time I saw you walking barefoot through the vines. I knew you were going to change my entire life when you showed me this tree and told me it was your sacred place." He slid off the bench onto one knee, pulling the ring box from his pocket. "I love you. I love everything about you. Your laugh, your kindness, the way you see beauty in ordinary things. I love how you make me feel like I could be enough just as I am, and I don't want to wait another day to make you mine." Tears were already streaming down Savannah's face. "You're proposing." "I'm proposing." He opened the box, revealing the ring. "Marry me, Savannah. Not eventually, not someday when everything is perfect. Marry me soon. Let me be your husband. Let me spend the rest of my life proving that you made the right choice." "Yes." The word came out choked with emotion. "Yes, of course, yes." Adrian's hands shook as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, the grape leaves catching morning light. Then Savannah launched herself at him, nearly knocking them both over, her arms wrapping around his neck as she kissed him for the first time. The world stopped. Her lips were soft and warm against his, tasting of coffee and tears and promises. Adrian's hands came up to cradle her face, angling her head to deepen the kiss. 6 months of careful restraint, of forehead kisses and held hands and deliberate boundaries, shattered in an instant. She made a small sound against his mouth that sent heat flooding through his veins, and he pulled her closer, one hand sliding into her hair while the other pressed against the small of her back. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Savannah was crying in earnest. "I love you," she whispered. "I've loved you for so long, and I was so scared to say it. I love you too. God, Savannah, I love you so much it terrifies me." He kissed her again, slower this time, reverent. "I don't want a long engagement. I can't wait years to make you my wife." "Then don't." She pulled back to look at him, her eyes shining. "Marry me soon here in the vineyard, just us and the people who matter. My father will lose his mind. Then we won't tell him, not yet, not until we're ready." Her hands framed his face, her thumbs stroking his cheekbones. "This is our life, Adrian, our choice. Let's do it on our terms." The idea took root immediately, a secret wedding just for them. No press, no society expectations, no Richard Lawson trying to control the narrative. Just Adrian and Savannah and the vows that would bind them together. "When?" he asked. 2 weeks, that gives us time to get the license, to prepare, and it's right before harvest starts. The vines will be perfect." 2 weeks, Adrian repeated, feeling something settle in his chest. "I can work with 2 weeks." They stayed under the oak tree until the sun was fully risen, wrapped in each other's arms, whispering plans and promises. Adrian called his lawyer that afternoon to handle the marriage license paperwork discreetly. Savannah told her father, who took one look at her glowing face and pulled Adrian into a fierce hug. "You hurt my daughter, and I'll bury you in the vineyard. Thomas said gruffly. "But I think you're going to make her very happy." "That's the plan," Adrian said. "That's always been the plan." The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. They kept the wedding plans small and intimate. Jonathan Whitmore would officiate since he had the credentials, and the vineyard staff would serve as witnesses. Savannah found a simple ivory dress at a boutique in town, knee-length and elegant without being ostentatious. Adrian wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit and had never been more nervous in his life. The morning of the wedding, Colin and Bradley showed up unannounced. "You didn't think we'd miss this, did you?" Colin said, pulling his youngest brother into an embrace. "How did you— Your lawyer is our lawyer too, genius. He mentioned you needed a marriage license expedited." Bradley grinned. "We're here to make sure you don't pass out before saying I do." Having his brothers there felt right in a way Adrian hadn't expected. They stood beside him under an arch of grapevines as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, and when Savannah appeared at the end of the makeshift aisle, Adrian forgot how to breathe. She walked toward him slowly, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers, her father at her side. The setting sun caught in her dark hair, making her glow like something otherworldly. Adrian's eyes burned as she reached him, and Thomas placed her hand in his with a nod of blessing. "You're so beautiful," Adrian whispered. "You're not so bad yourself," she whispered back, her smile tremulous. Jonathan's ceremony was simple and heartfelt. When it came time for the vows, Adrian took both her hands in his. "I promise to love you every day of my life, to protect you, to cherish you, to build a future worthy of everything you are. You're my home, Savannah, my peace, my everything." Savannah's voice shook as she spoke her own vows. "I promise to stand beside you through whatever comes, to love you with my whole heart, to be your partner, your sanctuary, your forever." And when Jonathan pronounced them husband and wife, when Adrian kissed his bride under the golden California sky with the vineyard stretched around them like a blessing, everything else fell away. The complications, the threats, his father's fury waiting in the future, none of it mattered. Because Savannah Lawson was his wife, and nothing would ever change that. The house Adrian had renovated for them sat nestled at the edge of the property, surrounded by oak trees and overlooking the vineyard. He'd been working on it in secret for months, restoring the old cottage that had once housed the property manager decades ago. It wasn't the grand house he'd promised to build on the hillside, but it was theirs, private, perfect. As the last of their guests departed after the intimate reception, Colin and Bradley embracing them both with promises to visit soon, Adrian took Savannah's hand and led her toward their temporary home. The sun had fully set now, stars beginning to emerge in the darkening sky, and fairy lights he'd strung through the trees cast everything in a soft, romantic glow. "Are you nervous?" he asked quietly as they walked. "Terrified," Savannah admitted, her hand tightening in his. "But in a good way." "Is that strange?" "Not at all." He stopped walking and turned to face her, his hands coming up to frame her face. "We don't have to do anything tonight, you know. We can just sleep, hold each other. There's no pressure, Savannah. I can wait as long as you need." She looked up at him with eyes full of love and trust. "I don't want to wait. I want you. I want this. I've never—" "I know." He kissed her forehead tenderly. "And I promise to take care of you. To go as slow as you need. To stop if you ask me to. This is about us, about joining together completely, not just physically, but in every way that matters." When they reached the cottage, Adrian lifted her into his arms, carrying her across the threshold. Savannah laughed, surprised and delighted, her arms wrapping around his neck. He'd lit candles throughout the bedroom, their flickering light casting dancing shadows on the walls. Rose petals were scattered across the bed, and soft music played from somewhere in the background. "You did all this," she whispered. "I wanted it to be perfect for you, for us." He set her down carefully, his hands lingering at her waist. "You're my wife now, Savannah Lawson. Do you know how incredible that sounds?" "Tell me again," she said, her fingers moving to the buttons of his shirt. "You're my wife." He caught her hands, bringing them to his lips. "My partner, my everything." He kissed each of her fingertips, his eyes never leaving hers. "Let me?" She nodded, and he slowly unzipped her dress, his fingers trailing along her spine as the fabric fell away. Savannah shivered, not from cold, but from the intensity of his gaze as he looked at her. She stood before him in simple white lace, feeling vulnerable and beautiful, and desperately loved all at once. "You're perfect," Adrian breathed, his voice rough with emotion. "Absolutely perfect." She reached up and finished unbuttoning his shirt, her hands trembling slightly as she pushed it off his shoulders. He was all lean muscle and warm skin, and she pressed her palm over his heart, feeling it thunder beneath her touch. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too. So much." He guided her to the bed, laying her down gently before settling beside her. "Tell me if anything hurts, if you want me to stop, if you need to slow down. Promise me, Savannah." "I promise." He kissed her then, slowly, deeply, pouring everything he felt into the connection of their mouths. His hands moved over her with reverent care, learning the landscape of her body, finding the places that made her gasp and tremble. She explored him too, growing bolder as passion built between them, as the last barriers between them fell away. When he finally moved over her, settling between her thighs, his eyes locked with hers. "I love you," he said again, his voice shaking. "You're everything to me." "Show me," she whispered, pulling him closer. He entered her slowly, carefully, his forehead pressed to hers as he felt her body adjust to accommodate him. She gasped at the brief pain, and he stilled immediately, his whole body trembling with the effort of holding back. "Breathe, sweetheart, just breathe, I've got you." She did, and as her body relaxed, the discomfort faded into something else entirely, something overwhelming and beautiful and right. Adrian began to move slowly at first, watching her face for any sign of pain, but there was only wonder now, and growing pleasure and love so intense it brought tears to both their eyes. They moved together in the candlelight, learning each other's rhythms, discovering what brought pleasure and what deepened their connection. Adrian whispered her name like a prayer, told her she was beautiful, that he loved her, that she was his entire world. Savannah held him close, her hands in his hair, her legs wrapped around him, giving herself to him completely. When pleasure crested for both of them, they clung to each other, trembling and gasping, feeling something fundamental shift between them. They were no longer two separate people. They were one, bound together in every way possible. Afterward, Adrian held her close, pressing kisses to her temple, her cheek, her lips. "Are you all right? Did I hurt you?" "I'm perfect," Savannah said, her voice thick with emotion. I never knew it could be like that." "Neither did I," he admitted. "I've never felt anything like this, Savannah. This wasn't just physical. It was everything." They lay tangled together as the candles burned low, talking in whispers about their future, about the children they might have someday, about the home they would build, about growing old together in this vineyard they both loved. Adrian traced patterns on her bare shoulder, occasionally leaning down to kiss her, still unable to believe she was really his. "No regrets?" he asked softly. "Not a single one." She turned in his arms to face him, her eyes shining. "This is exactly where I'm supposed to be. With you. Always with you." Over the following weeks, they settled into married life with an ease that surprised them both. Adrian worked from the cottage, managing his growing wine business while staying close to his wife. Savannah taught him more about viticulture, and they spent evenings tasting wines and dreaming about their first vintage together. They made love often, sometimes with the slow tenderness of their wedding night, sometimes with a passion that left them breathless and laughing. Each time deepened their bond, strengthened the connection that was becoming unbreakable. Adrian's brothers visited regularly, always calling ahead to make sure they weren't interrupting. Colin and Bradley had become fiercely protective of the secret, running interference with their father whenever Richard asked too many questions about Adrian's whereabouts. "He's getting more suspicious," Colin warned one afternoon over coffee. "He knows something's different about you. I'd say you have maybe 6 months before he figures it out and all hell breaks loose." Adrian glanced toward the cottage where Savannah was napping after they'd spent the morning working in the vineyard. "Let it break loose. I'm ready for that fight." "Are you sure?" Bradley asked seriously. "Because when Dad finds out it's going to be war, he'll try to destroy everything you've built here." "He can try." Adrian's voice carried absolute conviction. "But I'm not the boy who was afraid of him anymore. I have something worth fighting for now. Someone worth fighting for. And I will burn his entire empire down before I let him take her from me." His brothers exchanged glances, and Colin smiled. "Good, because when that fight comes, you won't be alone. We've got your back, little brother, always." As the months passed, Adrian and Savannah built their life together in secret, a perfect private world where nothing could touch them. They were deliriously happy, deeply in love, and absolutely certain that their love could withstand anything. They had no idea that the storm was already building on the horizon, that Richard Lawson was even now making plans that would tear their world apart. That in just a few short years, everything they'd built would be tested in ways neither of them could imagine. But for now, wrapped in each other's arms, as another sunset painted the vineyard in gold, they allowed themselves to believe in their happily ever after. And for almost 3 beautiful years, they were right, 3 years. Nearly 3 perfect years of hidden happiness, of mornings waking up beside the woman he loved, of building a wine empire with his own hands, while Savannah stood beside him as partner and muse. Adrian Lawson had almost convinced himself that the threat of his father's arrangement had faded into irrelevance. He should have known better. The call came on a Tuesday morning in late September. Colin's voice was tense, urgent. "Dad's summoning everyone to the mansion tomorrow night. He says it's urgent family business. Adrian Victoria Sterling turned 21 last week." The words hit like a physical blow. Adrian's hand tightened on his phone as he looked out the window of their cottage, now expanded and renovated into the home they'd dreamed of, where Savannah was tending to the herb garden she'd planted. 24 years old now, even more beautiful than the day he'd married her, she looked up and caught him watching. Her smile was sunshine and innocence and absolute trust. "I'm not going," Adrian said flatly. "You have to. If you don't show up, Dad will come there himself. He'll find out about Savannah, and you know he'll use that to his advantage. At least if you go, you can control the narrative." Adrian knew his brother was right, even as every instinct screamed at him to refuse. "What does he want?" "I don't know. But the Sterlings will be there too. All of them, including Victoria." Colin paused. "Be careful, Adrian. Dad's been too quiet lately. That's never a good sign." That evening, as Adrian held Savannah in their bed, he tried to find the words to tell her about the dinner. But every time he opened his mouth, fear closed his throat. She'd been anxious lately about his father, about the promise that was supposed to come due around now. He'd reassured her over and over that he would never honor that arrangement, that she was his wife in every way that mattered. But he'd never told her the full truth, that Victoria had turned 21 last week, that his father was almost certainly planning something. "You're tense," Savannah murmured, her hand tracing patterns on his chest. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. Just thinking about the new distribution deal." The lie tasted like ash, but he told himself it was to protect her. Just one more day, and he'd handle whatever his father threw at him, and then he could come home and tell her everything. He kissed her deeply before leaving the next morning, holding her longer than usual, breathing in the scent of her shampoo. "I love you. More than anything in this world. I love you too." She looked up at him with those trusting brown eyes. "You'll be home tonight?" "Always," he promised. The drive to his father's mansion felt like traveling to his own execution. Bradley met him at the door, his expression grim. "It's a setup," he said quietly. "There's a photographer here. Professional, hired by Dad. He's planning something. Where's Colin?" "Inside, trying to run interference, but Adrian, Victoria's here, and she looks as unhappy about this as you are." The dining room was already full when Adrian entered. His father sat at the head of the table, satisfaction written across his features. The Sterling family occupied one side, Mr. Sterling, his wife, and Victoria, who looked up as Adrian entered with an expression that was equal parts apology and defiance. "Adrian, so glad you could join us." Richard's voice dripped with false warmth. "We have much to celebrate tonight." "What are we celebrating?" Adrian asked coldly, taking the seat as far from Victoria as possible. "Your engagement, of course. Victoria has come of age, and it's time to honor the agreement our families made years ago." "There is no agreement. I never consented to it." "Your consent wasn't required." His father's eyes were steel. "This marriage will happen, Adrian. The contracts have been drawn up, the announcement prepared. In 6 months, you and Victoria will be married." Victoria spoke up then, her voice carrying an edge that surprised everyone. "I don't want this any more than he does, Mr. Lawson. I've told you and my father both I have no interest in marrying Adrian. What you want is irrelevant, her father snapped. This alliance benefits both our companies. Your companies, Victoria interrupted. Not us. Not our lives. You're treating us like property. Adrian felt a grudging respect for the young woman's spirit, even as his mind raced for a way out of this trap. I'm not doing this. I don't care what contracts you've signed or what announcements you've made. I'm not marrying her. Then you'll lose everything, Richard said calmly. Your stake in Lawson Oil, your trust fund, even your precious vineyard. I still have enough leverage with your suppliers and distributors to make sure that business fails. You'll have nothing. Then I'll have nothing. It wouldn't be the first time you've threatened that. His father's smile was predatory. But this time, I'll follow through. And I'll make sure everyone knows why. That my youngest son chose to dishonor his family's commitments, to spit on years of tradition and alliance, all for some ridiculous notion of independence. The dinner was a nightmare. Adrian sat rigid in his chair, barely touching his food, while his father orchestrated conversation designed to make it look like he and Victoria were a happy couple. At one point, the photographer appeared, and Adrian's instincts screamed at him to refuse, but his father's warning glance toward Victoria made him freeze. If he made a scene, Victoria would pay the price. She was trapped in this arrangement just as much as he was, a pawn in their father's game. So he stood when directed, maintaining careful distance from Victoria as they posed for what his father called informal family photos. He didn't smile, didn't touch her, kept his body language as cold and distant as possible. But the camera clicked anyway, capturing images that could be twisted into whatever narrative Richard Lawson wanted to sell. That's enough, Adrian said finally, his voice hard. I've attended your dinner. I've been polite to the Sterlings. But I will not marry Victoria, and no amount of threats or manipulation will change that. He left before his father could respond, Bradley and Colin flanking him as he strode to his car. That was bad, Bradley said quietly. It's about to get worse, Colin added. Dad had that photographer send those photos directly to every major newspaper in the state. By morning, the entire country will think you and Victoria are engaged. Adrian's blood turned to ice. I have to get home. I have to tell Savannah before she sees it in the papers. Colin grabbed his arm. Drive fast, little brother, because that announcement hits the morning edition. Adrian broke every speed limit on the way back to the vineyard, his heart hammering with dread. He'd been a coward. Again. He should have told Savannah about Victoria's birthday, about the dinner, about his father's plans. But he'd wanted to protect her from worry, and instead he'd left her vulnerable to being blindsided by the worst possible news. The lights were still on in their cottage when he arrived just after midnight. He found Savannah curled up in the armchair by the window, clearly having waited up for him. She smiled when he entered, but it faded when she saw his face. What happened? We need to talk. His voice was rough, urgent. There's something I should have told you before I left, and I need you to hear it from me before what? She stood, wrapping her cardigan tighter around herself. Adrian, you're scaring me. He told her everything then, about Victoria's birthday, about the dinner being a trap, about the photographer and his father's threats, about the engagement announcement that would hit newspapers in just a few hours. Savannah's face went pale. Photos? Of you and her? They don't mean anything. I maintained distance the entire time. I barely spoke to her. I made it clear I wanted nothing to do with, but there are photos, that will be in newspapers, announcing your engagement to another woman. Her voice was hollow, distant. Everyone will see them. Savannah, please. You have to believe me. I never agreed to this. I would never. I know. She held up a hand, and he saw it, trembling. I know you didn't agree to it. But you went to that dinner knowing what your father might do, and you didn't tell me. You left me here, Adrian. You left me here and walked into a trap, and now the whole world is going to think my husband is engaged to someone else. The word husband hung between them, a secret they'd kept so carefully, a truth that now felt fragile and endangered. I'll fix this, Adrian said desperately. I'll call every newspaper, I'll issue a statement, You'll what? Publicly announce that you've been secretly married for 3 years. That will just make everything worse. Your father will retaliate. The scandal will be enormous and everyone will say I trapped you or... Her voice broke. I can't think about this right now. I need you to go. Savannah. Please." Tears were streaming down her face now. "Please, Adrian. I need space to process this. I need to think. I'm not leaving you, not like this. Then sleep in the guest room. I can't look at you right now without seeing those photos in my head, without imagining what everyone's going to say, without feeling like everything we built is falling apart." Adrian wanted to argue, wanted to hold her and force her to listen, but the devastation in her eyes stopped him. He'd done this. His cowardice, his need to protect her by keeping secrets, had led them here. "I love you," he said, his voice breaking. "That's the only thing that matters, Savannah. I love you." "I know," she whispered. "But right now, that's not enough." He left her there, retreating to the guest room with his heart in pieces. And as he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, knowing she was doing the same just down the hall, Adrian understood that the real nightmare was only beginning. Savannah woke before dawn, her eyes gritty from crying and lack of sleep. She'd heard Adrian pacing in the guest room for hours before finally falling silent around 3. Part of her had wanted to go to him, to seek comfort in his arms the way she always did when the world felt overwhelming. But the other part, the part that felt raw and betrayed, couldn't move past the image of him at a dinner with the woman he was supposedly promised to, posing for photos that would tell the world a lie. Or was it a lie? That poisonous thought had kept her awake most of the night. Had she been the lie all along? The secret wife hidden away while he maintained his real life elsewhere? No, she knew that wasn't true. She'd felt his love in every touch, every whispered word, every sacrifice he'd made over the past 3 years. But knowing and feeling were different things, and right now her feelings were a chaotic mess of hurt and fear and anger. The newspaper arrived at 6:30, the same as it did every morning. Thomas Fleming usually retrieved it on his way to start the day's work, bringing it to the cottage with coffee and whatever gossip he'd heard from the staff. But this morning, Savannah heard the delivery truck, and something drove her outside in her robe and bare feet. The newspaper sat on the porch in its plastic sleeve, innocent, ordinary, about to destroy her world. She picked it up with shaking hands, already knowing what she would find. But knowing didn't prepare her for the reality. The photo took up half the front page. Adrian in a suit that she recognized, standing beside a stunning young woman with copper hair and emerald eyes. They weren't touching, but they were positioned together, framed against the opulent dining room of what could only be the Lawson mansion. The headline screamed in bold letters, "Oil Empire Heir announces engagement to Sterling heiress." Beneath it, a smaller subheading, "Adrian Lawson and Victoria Sterling to unite 2 dynasties in spring wedding." The article went on to describe the arranged marriage that had been carefully planned for years, the business advantages of the union, quotes from Richard Lawson about how proud he was of his youngest son for honoring family commitments. There was even speculation about the wedding venue and guest list. Nothing about a wife in Napa Valley. Nothing about a secret marriage 3 years ago. Nothing about her, because to the rest of the world she didn't exist. The newspaper fell from her numb fingers. Her legs gave out, and she sank onto the porch steps, a keening sound escaping her throat that she barely recognized as her own voice. 3 years. 3 years of marriage, of love, of building a life together, and it could all be erased with one photograph and a fabricated headline. "Savannah!" She looked up to find her father standing there, his face white with shock as he picked up the fallen newspaper. He read it quickly, and she watched rage and heartbreak war across his features. That son of a... He sat beside her, pulling her into his arms as she finally, truly broke. "I'm going to kill him. I'm going to bury him in the vineyard like I promised." He didn't... She could barely speak through her sobs. He said it was a trap, that his father arranged everything. That he never agreed to it. Then why the hell is his picture in the paper announcing his engagement? Thomas's voice was rough with fury. Why didn't he refuse? Why didn't he tell them about you? Those were exactly the questions Savannah couldn't answer, the ones that had tormented her all night. The sound of a door opening made them both turn. Adrian stood in the doorway of the cottage, still in yesterday's clothes, his hair disheveled and his face haggard. His eyes went immediately to the newspaper in Thomas's hands and what little color he had drained away. "Don't," he said, his voice hoarse. "Don't look at that. Let me explain." "Explain?" Savannah pushed to her feet, the newspaper crumpling in her fist. Explain how my husband is on the front page of every newspaper in the country, engaged to another woman. Explain how you went to that dinner knowing this might happen and didn't tell me. Explain how I'm finding out I'm supposedly the other woman from the morning paper. You're not the other woman, you're my wife. The only woman I want, the only one I'll ever want. Then why does the entire world think differently? Her voice rose, 3 years of trust shattering like glass. Why did you let them take these photos? Why didn't you refuse? Why didn't you tell them the truth? Because I was trying to protect you. Adrian's composure cracked. If I'd announced our marriage, my father would have destroyed everything. Your reputation, your life here, everything we've built. I thought if I just played along for one night, I could figure out how to handle it without dragging you into the nightmare. But I'm already in the nightmare, Adrian. I'm in it right now, holding proof that my marriage is a secret and a shame, that I'm someone you hide away while you pose for engagement photos with your real fiancée. She's not my fiancée. That arrangement means nothing to me. But it means something to your father. It means something to her family. It means something to every person who's going to read this newspaper and think you're available, think you're unattached, think you're someone you're not. She threw the newspaper at his feet. 3 years, Adrian. 3 years I've been your wife, and nobody knows. Your brothers know, but that's it, no one else. I've never met your father, never been to your family home, never been introduced as anything other than the administrator's daughter who helps with the vineyard. And now I see why, because I was never meant to be permanent. I was just supposed to be your secret until you had to go through with the real arrangement. That's not true. The anguish in his voice was palpable. You know that's not true. I married you because I couldn't imagine a life without you, because you're everything to me. If I'm everything, then why am I nothing to the rest of the world? Her voice broke on the last word. Thomas stood, placing himself protectively between his daughter and Adrian. I think you need to leave, Mr. Lawson. I'm not leaving her. Not like this. Yes, you are. Savannah's voice was hollow now, all the fight draining out of her into numb grief. Because I can't look at you right now without seeing that photo, without wondering if you're going to choose me or choose the easier path, without feeling like maybe I never really knew you at all. Savannah, please, go. She turned away, unable to bear the devastation on his face. Just go, Adrian. Give me time to think, to process. I need to figure out if our love is strong enough to survive this. Right now, I don't know anymore. She heard him take a step toward her, heard her father's warning growl, heard Adrian's ragged breathing as he fought for control. Then finally, his footsteps retreating, a car door slamming, an engine starting, and just like that, her husband was gone. Savannah collapsed onto the porch steps again, her father's arms around her as she cried. She cried for the life they'd built, for the trust that felt broken, for the future that suddenly seemed impossibly fragile. She cried until there were no tears left, until her body was empty and aching and exhausted. Inside the cottage, her phone buzzed with ignored calls and texts. Adrian, desperate and relentless. But she couldn't answer. Couldn't let him explain away this hurt with promises and declarations of love. Not yet. Not until she could breathe without feeling like her heart was being torn in two. Because Savannah had learned something terrible in the hours since he'd left for that dinner. Love wasn't always enough. Sometimes love required trust, and right now, looking at that newspaper photo, her trust felt like something shattered beyond repair, even if she still loved him with every broken piece of her heart. Adrian Lawson had negotiated billion-dollar mergers, faced down hostile boardrooms, and stood up to his father's iron will. But nothing had prepared him for the agony of being shut out by the woman he loved. He returned to the vineyard every single day. Like clockwork, he arrived at dawn and took up residence on the stone bench beneath the oak tree where he'd first told Savannah he loved her. He brought coffee that grew cold as hours passed. He brought letters written in his own hand, pouring his heart onto paper in ways he'd never learned to do with words. He left them on her doorstep, never knowing if she read them. On the third day, he brought wildflowers from the hillside where they'd planned to build their dream house. He left them carefully arranged in a mason jar by her door, remembering how she'd once told him she preferred simple wildflowers to expensive roses. He saw her sometimes, through windows or between rows of vines. She never approached, never acknowledged his presence, but he knew she was watching, knew she saw him sitting there day after day, waiting for a sign that she might forgive him. Colin and Bradley visited on the 5th day, finding him looking haggard and hollow-eyed. "You look like hell," Bradley said bluntly. "I feel like hell," Adrian admitted. "She won't talk to me, won't read my texts. Her father threatened to have me physically removed if I try to go inside. Can you blame her?" Colin sat beside him on the bench. She found out from a newspaper that her secret husband was supposedly engaged to someone else. That's not exactly a minor betrayal of trust. I never betrayed her. I love her more than my own life. But you kept secrets, Colin said gently. You didn't tell her about Victoria's birthday, about what Dad might be planning. You thought you were protecting her, but you were actually protecting yourself from having to face the problem head-on. The words hit like a punch because they were true. Adrian had been a coward, not about his love for Savannah, but about confronting the forces that threatened them. He'd hoped that by keeping her separate from the ugliness of his father's schemes, he could somehow shield her from pain. Instead, his silence had wounded her more deeply than honesty ever could have. "How do I fix this?" His voice cracked. "You keep showing up," Bradley said. "You prove that you're willing to fight for her, and when the time is right, you make the grand gesture that shows her, and everyone else, exactly where you stand." On the 7th day, it rained. Adrian sat on the bench anyway, water soaking through his clothes, turning his hair into dripping strands. He didn't care. He'd sit through hurricanes if it meant Savannah might glance out her window and see him there, steadfast and immovable. She did see him. Through the kitchen window, Savannah watched the man she loved sitting in the pouring rain, like some tragic figure from a romance novel. Part of her wanted to run out there, to drag him inside and hold him and forgive him everything. The other part, the wounded, scared part, remembered that newspaper photo and couldn't move. "He's going to catch pneumonia," her father muttered, looking over her shoulder. "Good," Savannah said, but her voice wavered. "You don't mean that." "I don't know what I mean anymore, Dad." She turned away from the window, wrapping her arms around herself. "I love him so much it's destroying me. But how do I trust him again? How do I believe that he won't keep secrets the next time things get complicated?" Thomas was quiet for a long moment. "That man has been sitting outside in the rain for 3 hours, Savannah. I've watched powerful men claim to love things. Money, status, control. But I've never seen anyone love another person the way Adrian Lawson loves you. He's not perfect. He made mistakes. But he's out there fighting for you in the only way he knows how. By sitting on a bench. By showing up. Day after day. Even when you won't look at him, even when I threaten to call the police. Even when it would be so much easier to just give up and go back to his old life. That's not the behavior of someone who sees you as expendable, sweetheart. That's someone who's broken without you." On the 12th day, her father's words finally penetrated the wall Savannah had built around her heart. She watched Adrian from her bedroom window. He looked thinner, exhausted, his usual polished appearance replaced by rumpled clothes and hollow eyes. He sat with his head in his hands, and even from a distance, she could see the defeat in his posture. He was giving up. After 12 days of fighting, he was finally giving up. The realization terrified her more than anything else had. Because if Adrian gave up, if he stopped fighting, what did that say about the strength of his love? And what did it say about her that she'd pushed away the person who mattered most? She was halfway to the door when her phone rang. Colin Lawson's name flashed on the screen. He'd been calling regularly since the scandal broke, leaving voicemails assuring her that Adrian was devastated and desperately in love with her. She'd ignored them all. This time, she answered. "Savannah, thank God." "Listen, I don't have much time. Adrian is about to do something either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid, and I need you to know about it before it happens." "What are you talking about?" "He's calling a press conference in 2 hours. He's going to tell the entire world the truth about your marriage, about Dad's manipulations, about everything. He's going to burn every bridge with our father, destroy his reputation, risk losing everything he's built. All for you. All to prove that you're the only thing that matters." Savannah's knees went weak. "He can't. Your father will destroy him." "I know. Brad and I have tried to talk him out of it, but he won't listen. He says he's done hiding, done protecting everyone except the person who deserves protection most. He's doing this, Savannah. Whether you take him back or not, he's doing this." After they hung up, Savannah stood frozen in her kitchen, her mind racing. Adrian was about to sacrifice everything. His relationship with his father, his standing in society, possibly even his business, all to publicly claim her as his wife, to erase the shame of their secret and replace it with pride. The man sitting defeated on that bench wasn't giving up. He was gathering his strength for the fight of his life. 2 hours later, Savannah sat in front of her television with her father, both of them tense with anticipation. The local news broke into regular programming with a special announcement. Adrian Lawson, youngest son of oil magnate Richard Lawson, had called an emergency press conference. Adrian stood behind a podium, every camera in the state trained on him. He looked terrible, exhausted and strained, but his voice was clear and unwavering when he spoke. 3 years ago, I met the woman who would change my life forever. Her name is Savannah Fleming, and she became my wife in a private ceremony witnessed by people who matter most to us. Her father, our closest friends, and my brothers. We kept our marriage secret because my father had arranged for me to marry someone else, and I was afraid of what he might do if he discovered I'd defied him. The room erupted with questions, but Adrian held up a hand. I was a coward. Not about my love for my wife. I have never once doubted that she is the greatest thing that's ever happened to me, but I was a coward about protecting that love from forces that wanted to destroy it. When my father orchestrated that engagement announcement, I should have immediately told the truth. Instead, I let my wife discover from a newspaper that the world thought I belonged to someone else. I let her feel like a secret and a shame when she is neither. She is my wife, my partner, my entire heart. He pulled out a folder and held up photos, their wedding photos, showing Adrian and Savannah exchanging vows beneath the vineyard's golden sky. Official documents, proving their marriage was legal and binding. This marriage is real. It has been real for nearly 3 years, and while I understand my father's disappointment that I didn't honor his arrangement, I will not apologize for following my heart. The Sterling family deserves to know the truth, and Victoria Sterling deserves the freedom to find someone who can love her the way she deserves. Something I could never do because my heart has always belonged to my wife. Tears streamed down Savannah's face as she watched her husband lay his soul bare before the world. Savannah, if you're watching this, and I hope you are, I need you to know that I would give up everything for you. My father's approval, my family's wealth, my place in society, all of it, because none of it means anything without you. You are my home. You are my peace. You are the reason I breathe. And I am so sorry I ever made you feel like you were anything less than my entire world. His voice broke on the last words, and the vulnerability on his face was devastating. This wasn't a calculated business move or a publicity stunt. This was a man on his knees, begging for forgiveness from the woman he loved, willing to destroy his entire life just to prove his devotion. "I'll wait for you as long as it takes," Adrian said, looking directly into the camera. "I'll sit under our oak tree every day until you're ready to talk to me. And if you decide you can't forgive me, if you tell me to leave and never come back, I'll respect that. But please know that wherever I go, whatever I do, I will always be your husband. Until my last breath, I will be yours." The press conference erupted in chaos as Adrian walked away, ignoring the shouted questions. Savannah sat frozen, her father's hand on her shoulder, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. Adrian had just sacrificed everything, for her, for them, and she'd been hiding in her house, nursing her hurt, while the man she loved prepared to wage war against the entire world just to prove his love was true. "Go," her father said softly. "He'll be back here soon. Go meet him, Savannah. Don't make him wait another second." She was already moving. Adrian's hands shook on the steering wheel as he drove back to the vineyard. He'd just destroyed his relationship with his father on national television, potentially damaged his business, and exposed the most private, precious part of his life to public scrutiny. And he'd do it all again in a heartbeat if it meant Savannah might forgive him. He didn't know what he'd find when he arrived. Part of him feared the cottage would be dark and empty, that she'd watched his confession and still found it lacking. But as he pulled through the gates, his headlights caught a figure standing by the oak tree. Savannah. She wore one of his old sweatshirts over leggings, her hair loose around her shoulders, her face illuminated by moonlight and the distant glow from the cottage windows. She looked exactly as beautiful as the first time he'd seen her, and just as unreachable. Adrian climbed out of the car slowly, afraid that any sudden movement might shatter this moment. They stood 20 feet apart, the distance between them filled with 2 weeks of hurt and 3 years of love and a lifetime of hope hanging in the balance. "I watched," Savannah said, her voice carrying across the space. "I saw what you did. I meant every word." His voice was hoarse from emotion and exhaustion. "I would do it again. I would do worse, Savannah, if it meant proving to you that you're the only thing that matters. You sacrificed everything." Tears gleamed on her cheeks. "Your father is going to be furious. The media is going to tear you apart, and all because I was too hurt and stubborn to listen." "No." He took a step toward her, then another. "Don't you dare blame yourself for my mistakes. I should have trusted you with the truth from the beginning. I should have fought this battle years ago, instead of hoping it would disappear if I ignored it long enough. You had every right to be hurt, to be angry, to shut me out. But I shouldn't have shut you out." She moved toward him too, closing the distance between them. "You were sitting in the rain, Adrian, for hours. My dad said you've been here every single day waiting for me, and I was so caught up in my pain that I couldn't see yours." They were close enough to touch now, but neither reached out, both afraid and desperate in equal measure. "I forgive you," Savannah whispered, "for not telling me about the dinner, for the secrets, for all of it, because I understand why you did it. You were trying to protect me. You've always tried to protect me, even when protection looked like distance. But Adrian, I don't need protection. I need partnership. I need you to trust me enough to share the burdens, to let me be strong with you instead of sheltering me from storms." "I know." He raised a trembling hand to her face, his thumb catching a tear. "I know, and I swear to you, no more secrets. No more trying to handle everything alone. From now on, we face everything together, the good, the bad, and my father's inevitable fury." "Together," she agreed, her hand covering his where it rested against her cheek. "Always together. Does this mean you forgive me? That you're giving me another chance?" "I'm giving us another chance." She rose on her toes, bringing their faces closer. "Because I love you, Adrian Lawson. I've loved you since that first morning when you found me in the vineyard, and I'll love you until the day I die, even when you're being an overprotective idiot who thinks he has to save the world alone." "I love you too," he breathed. "God, Savannah, I love you so much." She kissed him then, cutting off his words with her mouth. It was nothing like their gentle wedding kiss or the careful intimacy they'd shared over 3 years. This kiss was desperate and claiming, angry and forgiving, breaking and healing all at once. His arms wrapped around her waist, lifting her off her feet as he poured weeks of loneliness and fear into the connection. She clutched his shoulders, kissing him back with equal intensity. Tasting salt from tears, neither of them could stop crying. When they finally broke apart, both gasping, he pressed his forehead to hers. "Come home with me, please. I can't spend another night away from you." "I am home." She pulled back just enough to look into his eyes. "Wherever you are, that's home." They walked to the cottage hand in hand, neither willing to let go even for a moment. Inside, they held each other on the couch, not speaking, just breathing in sync until the adrenaline faded and exhaustion set in. They fell asleep, tangled together, and for the first time in 2 weeks, both slept peacefully. The next morning brought Richard Lawson. Adrian heard the cars first, multiple vehicles pulling up to the cottage with the kind of aggressive speed that meant trouble. He was on his feet instantly, positioning himself between Savannah and the door as his father stormed in, flanked by Colin and Bradley. "What the hell were you thinking?" Richard's face was purple with rage. "You humiliated me on national television, destroyed years of careful planning, made me look like a fool." "You did that yourself," Adrian said coldly, his arm around Savannah's waist. "When you tried to sell your son like cattle in a business deal." "How is she's nobody?" Richard jabbed a finger at Savannah. "An administrator's daughter with no connections, no family name, no—" "Choose your next words very carefully." Adrian's voice dropped to something dangerous. "Because you're about to insult my wife, and if you do that, you and I are done, permanently." Colin stepped between them, his expression serious. "Dad, look at them." "I don't need to look at—" "Look at them." Bradley moved to stand beside Colin, forming a united front. "Really look." Richard finally turned his full attention to Adrian and Savannah. They stood together, her hand over his heart, his fingers threading through hers. Even after the worst 2 weeks of their lives, even exhausted and emotionally raw, they fit together with a rightness that was impossible to deny. The way Adrian's body angled protectively toward her, the way Savannah's thumb stroked his knuckles in unconscious comfort, it spoke of years of intimacy, of a bond forged through more than just passion. "That's love, Dad," Colin said quietly. "Real love. The kind Mom and you had before she died. You remember what that looked like, don't you?" Something shifted in Richard's expression. Grief, maybe, or recognition. He stared at his youngest son for a long moment, then at the woman who'd somehow become the center of Adrian's universe. "You really love her," he said finally. Not a question, an observation. "More than anything in this world," Adrian confirmed. "More than Lawson Oil, more than the family name, more than your approval. She's my wife, Dad. And if you can't accept that, then I choose her over you every single time." The silence stretched long and painful. Then Richard sighed, a sound of defeat and resignation. "I suppose I don't have much choice, do I? You've already married her, announced it to the entire country, and made it clear you're willing to walk away from everything I built." "I'll build something better," Adrian said. "Something based on love instead of manipulation." "Your mother would have liked her," Richard said abruptly, looking at Savannah properly for the first time. "She would have said I was an old fool for trying to control something that can't be controlled." It wasn't an apology, but it was acceptance, and for now that was enough. Colin approached Savannah, his smile warm. "Welcome to the family officially this time." "Sorry it took Dad so long to get his head out of his—" "Colin," Adrian warned, but he was smiling. 2 months later, they renewed their vows in the vineyard with both families present. This time, there were no secrets, no shadows. Just Savannah in a dress the color of champagne, Adrian in a suit that fit him perfectly, and love that had been tested and emerged stronger. He kissed her under the same arch where they'd first married, and this kiss was freedom and promise and everything they'd fought for. That night, in their bed with moonlight streaming through the windows, they made love with the desperate intensity of people who'd almost lost everything. Adrian touched her, like she was precious and miraculous, whispering how much he loved her between kisses. Savannah held him close, showing him with her body what words couldn't express, that she chose him, that she forgave him, that their love was unbreakable. 3 weeks later, Savannah stood in their bathroom holding a positive pregnancy test with shaking hands. She found Adrian in the vineyard, checking the late-season growth. He turned when he heard her approach, his smile fading when he saw her face. "What's wrong?" Instead of answering, she held out the test. Adrian stared at it for 3 full seconds before the meaning registered. Then his knees actually buckled, and he sank onto the ground, pulling her down with him. His hands went to her still flat stomach, his eyes bright with tears. "We're having a baby," he whispered, awed. "Savannah, we're having a baby." "We're having a baby," she confirmed, laughing through tears. He kissed her stomach reverently, then her lips, then her stomach again. "I love you. I love you both so much. You've given me everything, a home, a purpose, a family. You've given me a reason to be better than I ever thought I could be." Savannah threaded her fingers through his hair, looking out over the vineyard that had brought them together. "You gave me the same things. You saw me when I was invisible. You loved me when I didn't know I deserved to be loved. You fought for us when it would have been easier to give up." They sat there as the sun set, his hands on her stomach, her hands in his hair, both overwhelmed by the gift of new life and second chances, and a love that had survived every test thrown at it. The vineyard stretched around them, vines heavy with fruit, the earth rich and fertile beneath them. And as Adrian kissed his wife beneath the golden sky, he knew with absolute certainty that every sacrifice, every battle, every moment of pain had been worth it to arrive at this perfect moment. This was their happily ever after. Hard-won, fiercely protected, and absolutely irrevocably theirs. Leave your comment and share this story with someone special. It truly helps us keep bringing new stories to you. And if you want to follow every chapter of this emotional journey, subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. Your support makes all the difference.